On that faithful day, it was the sound of a faint school bell echoing, fading into the empty corridors of a 1970s high school. It was the last day of school. The hallway should have been filled with laughter, the smell of chalk and textbooks, the sound of sneakers squeaking against linoleum. But inside room 213, something unthinkable happened. She was only 26, a beloved teacher, a friend, a sister. And when her body was discovered, stabbed to death at her desk, the community was shattered. It took nearly 5 decades to solve. This is the story of Diane Peterson. It was 1978, and San Jose was a city of growth. Silicon Valley hadn't yet become the empire it is today. It was still a patchwork of orchards, quiet neighborhoods, and schools that buzzed with the promise of the future. Teachers weren't just educators, they were role models, anchors in a community that prided itself on progress and togetherness. Diane Peterson was one of those anchors, only 26 years old, but already adored by her students, an English teacher who believed literature could change lives. Her colleagues remembered her quoting Steinbeck in the teacher's lounge. Her students remembered her reading poetry aloud, with a voice that made even reluctant teens lean forward. But she wasn't just a teacher, Diane was a dreamer. She wanted to write a novel one day. She lived in a small apartment with her to cats Hemingway and Poe, and her walls were lined with bookshelves overflowing with dog-eared paperbacks. She went jogging every morning before school. She volunteered at the local library on weekends. To her friends, she was vibrant, witty, and compassionate. To her family, she was the glue. She had quirks, too. She collected antique typewriters, even though they barely fit in her one-bedroom apartment. She kept a journal she never showed anyone, writing late into the night with a cup of tea by her side. Her sister said Diane always believed stories could save people. She just never knew hers would end in tragedy. The year was 1978. Gas was 63 cents a gallon. Jimmy Carter was president. California was caught between the fading warmth of small-town America and the looming shadow of Silicon Valley's rise. San Jose was changing, but it was still a place where people left their doors unlocked. Kids played outside until dusk, and schools were the heart of the community. And in one of those classrooms was a woman who carried more light than most. Her name was Diane Peterson. Diane wasn't just a teacher. She was the kind of person people gravitated toward without even realizing it. Students remembered the way she leaned on a desk while reading aloud, her voice animated and lyrical. She made Shakespeare feel like gossip from the cafeteria. She made Steinbeck sound like a confession. To teenagers who often felt unseen, Diane made them feel heard. Her quirks were legendary. She had a soft spot for second-hand bookshops where she'd spend hours rummaging through dusty shelves for rare editions. She collected antique typewriters, big, clunky machines with fading keys. Her apartment was lined with them, each one with its own story. And yes, she named her cats Hemingway and Poe. She wasn't just teaching other people to dream. Diane had her own. She wanted to write a novel one day, something raw, something true. Late at night, after grading papers, she'd pour tea into a chipped mug, sit at her desk, and fill her journal with ideas. Some nights she wrote pages, some nights she just scribbled quotes. Her sister said Diane believed in the magic of words, that if you wrote something down, you could make it real. But it wasn't all work and solitude. Diane was deeply woven into her community. On Saturdays, she volunteered at the library, reading stories to children in the corner of the children's wing. She ran the school's creative writing club, where shy teenagers found the courage to share their first poems. Neighbors remembered her jogging every morning at sunrise, ponytail bouncing, smiling even when she passed strangers. To her friends, she was witty, quick with a joke, the kind of person who filled a room with ease. To her family, Diane was more than a teacher, more than a friend. She was the glue. She was the one who called her mother every Sunday, who remembered birthdays, who wrote postcards on vacations. Her younger sister, Linda, would later say, "She was the one I looked up to. She wasn't just my sister, she was my safe place." But even the safest places can be shattered in an instant. And for Diane, that instant came on June 5, 1978. The last day of school should have been filled with joy. For Diane, it would be her last day alive. June 5, 1978, the first Monday of summer break. Diane Peterson woke before the sun, as she always did. She brewed a pot of coffee, fed Hemingway and Poe, and sat at her desk to scribble a few lines in her journal. She didn't know it yet, but these would be the last words she ever wrote. Neighbors later recalled seeing her jog through the quiet San Jose streets around 6:30 a.m., ponytail swinging, sweat glistening, a quick wave to the mailman. To anyone watching, it was just another morning. Normal, routine, but normalcy is a fragile illusion. By 8 a.m., Diane was at the high school. Though classes were over, she came in to clean her classroom, box up supplies, and meet with a colleague. Custodians saw her smiling, chatting in the halls, arms full of books. At 10:15, she called her mother from the staff room. She said she'd stop by later that evening with a bottle of wine to celebrate the start of summer. She never showed up. Around noon, a student dropped by to return a textbook. He swears Diane was there, alive, sitting cross-legged on her desk, laughing about something. She told him, "Enjoy your summer. Don't forget to write." Those words would be the last any student ever heard from her. At 1:30 p.m., a secretary saw Diane walking out of the building toward the parking lot, carrying a box of supplies. The day was hot, the sun harsh on the asphalt. Diane loaded the box into her car. She waved, she smiled. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. By 7 p.m., when Diane's mother realized she hadn't come by, she called her daughter's apartment. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. At 9 p.m., panic set in. Diane was not the type to disappear. By 10 p.m., her family drove to her apartment. The lights inside were off. Her car was not in the driveway. At 2 a.m., police located her vehicle abandoned in a shopping mall parking lot less than 2 miles from her apartment. The car was locked, keys gone, no sign of struggle. Just silence and an unease that crept like smoke. Inside the car, tucked neatly into the glove compartment, officers found Diane's journal. The last entry dated June 5th. Just one line, scrawled in hurried penmanship, "Meeting someone tonight. He says he knows me better than anyone." She never made it home. She never made it to her mother's. Diane Peterson had vanished into the California night, and what happened next would reveal secrets no one was prepared to face. When Diane Peterson's car was discovered in the early hours of June 6, 1978, the San Jose Police Department knew they had a problem. Missing adults in their 20s were usually high priority, not in a city pulsing with transplants and young dreamers, but Diane was different. She was a teacher, a daughter, a friend. And when police opened her journal and read the words, "Meeting someone tonight. He says he knows me better than anyone," everything changed. Her mother, Margaret, refused to go home. She sat in that apartment parking lot for hours, clutching a rosary, whispering prayers. Her brother Robert wandered the complex, shouting her name. Neighbors brought flashlights, scoured alleys, checked dumpsters. It wasn't just fear, it was disbelief. How could Diane, the girl who always showed up, suddenly be gone? By dawn, detectives canvassed the area. They pulled security logs from the mall where her car was found. They questioned janitors, night guards, late shift workers. No one had seen her. No one had heard a thing. And yet, they all agreed on one detail. The car hadn't been there at midnight. Someone had parked it between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. long after Diane was last seen. At 10 a.m., police received a strange tip. A woman called dispatch, claiming she had seen Diane the night before at a diner off Monterey Road sitting with a man. The woman described him as late 30s, tall, dark hair, wearing a leather jacket. Diane, she said, looked nervous, even frightened. But when detectives raced to the diner and pulled receipts, they found no trace. The waitress on shift said she couldn't remember anyone matching the description. The tipster's call was never traced. Attention soon turned to the men in Diane's life. A fellow teacher who had once asked her out, but been rejected. A former boyfriend who never quite let go. Even her landlord, who some tenants whispered about after dark. Each man swore he hadn't seen her. Each one passed the polygraph. And still detectives couldn't shake the feeling that someone was lying. The journal entry became their lifeline. Meeting someone tonight. He says he knows me better than anyone. Was it a date? A stalker? A secret she hadn't told her family? Detectives brought in handwriting analysts. They confirmed it was hers. But the rushed, almost panicked strokes suggested something else: fear. It wasn't a romantic flutter, it was a warning, then a breakthrough. A gas station attendant came forward. He claimed he saw Diane around 8:45 p.m. on June 5th, hours after she was last seen leaving school. She wasn't alone. A man was with her, leaning close, whispering. The attendant remembered her because, as she paid for gas, she mouthed something he didn't catch. Later, he swore she was trying to say, "Help me." If the witness was right, Diane Peterson hadn't simply vanished, she had been taken. For weeks, San Jose police had nothing but whispers, false leads, and a family falling apart. Diane Peterson was slipping into the cold file drawer, another name in the growing stack of California's missing women. But then one detective noticed something, a name, a face, a pattern. Her journal described a man who said he knew her better than anyone. Detectives cross-referenced Diane's circle of acquaintances, teachers, old classmates, neighbors, and one name kept circling back, Richard Coleman. 39 years old, a quiet maintenance worker who often lingered near the school where Diane taught. To most, he was invisible. To police, suddenly he was everywhere. Coleman had no criminal record, but when police dug deeper, they uncovered restraining orders. 3 women, all young, all single, all teachers, had accused him of stalking, following them home, leaving notes on their cars. Each case had been dismissed for lack of evidence. And now, Diane's journal entry sounded like his signature. Detectives launched round-the-clock surveillance. Coleman lived alone in a small ranch-style house on the edge of town. He worked odd hours, came home late, carried bags into the garage. For 2 weeks, nothing unusual happened. But then at 2:15 a.m. on July 3rd, officers spotted him hauling something heavy, wrapped in a tarp, from his trunk into the basement, and that was enough for a warrant. The raid was swift. Coleman was arrested on his porch, cigarettes still burning between his fingers. Inside, officers descended into the basement, and what they found turned a missing person case into a nightmare. On a workbench sat Diane's purse. Her ID, her keys, neatly arranged, as if on display. Nearby, a box filled with women's jewelry, lockets, earrings, watches, each one tagged with a date. And then in the far corner, a trunk. Inside the trunk, detectives found clothing that matched descriptions from multiple missing women. But it was the walls that told the most chilling story. On concrete, Coleman had pinned dozens of Polaroids. Some blurred, some clear, all of young women terrified, bound, pleading. And among them, Diane Peterson. Tests confirmed the worst. Blood traces in the basement matched Diane, but there was more. Forensic evidence linked Coleman's house to at least 2 other cold cases, women who had vanished years before. Suddenly, Diane's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was the key to unmasking a serial predator who had hidden in plain sight for over a decade. And then, police discovered something no one expected. In Diane's own handwriting, a second journal entry, one never reported, hidden in the margins. It read, "He's not the person you think you know." Was it a warning? A clue, or Diane's final attempt to expose her killer? The answer would come out in court. June 2025, the courthouse in downtown San Jose was packed. Reporters lined the steps, victims' families clutched photographs. And in the center of it all, Richard Coleman, the quiet maintenance worker now unmasked as a predator. His trial would unearth horrors no one in that room could have prepared for. Prosecutors laid out a timeline stretching over 15 years. Diane Peterson was not Coleman's first victim, she was his last. DNA linked him to 3 other women whose cases had gone cold. Each vanished under eerily similar circumstances. Each left behind families who had begged for answers. Now, at last, they were all in the same room listening to the evidence that tied their pain to one man. Diane's mother, her voice trembling, told the jury about the last phone call she ever had with her daughter. She said she'd be home for Sunday dinner. I set the table for her every week after that. I kept waiting. The room fell silent. Tears rippled through the gallery. Even seasoned detectives lowered their eyes. Then came the sister of another victim. She clutched a necklace, one found in Coleman's basement. This was hers. He kept it as a trophy. Like she was nothing but an object, but she was my sister. She was everything. Her words cut like glass through the silence. Coleman's attorneys argued there was no direct evidence proving murder. Yes, there were photos. Yes, there was blood. But no bodies, no definitive cause of death. They painted Coleman as an eccentric loner with a disturbing hobby, but not a killer. And in that razor-thin margin, they hoped to plant doubt, but then came the journal. Diane's words, her last living voice, echoed through the courtroom. The prosecution read the haunting line aloud. "He is not the person you think you know." Gasps filled the room. To jurors, it was not just a note. It was a dying declaration. Diane herself had pointed the finger from beyond the grave. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 7 hours. On July 28, 2025, they filed back into the courtroom. Every seat was filled, every breath held. The foreman's voice trembled as he read, "Guilty on all counts." Then thunderclap of public followed. There were gasps, cries, tears pouring out from the eyes of family members and others in court. Richard Coleman was sentenced to life without parole. As deputies led him away, he turned once to the gallery, his face blank, unreadable. For some, justice had been served. For others, no verdict could fill the empty chairs left behind at dinner tables. No sentence could erase years of unanswered prayers. But perhaps the most haunting moment came when Diane's father stood. He held her photograph high and said, "This is my daughter. You can lock him away forever, but don't you dare let the world forget her name." And in that instant, the courtroom judge, jury, strangers rose to their feet in silent respect. In the end, the case of Richard Coleman was not just about one man's crimes. It was about the lives he stole, about Diane, who loved music and dreamed of teaching, about the sisters, the daughters, the mothers who never came home. For years, they were statistics, forgotten files gathering dust. But in 2025, they were finally given names, faces, and justice. The community of San Jose still feels the scars. But the families say the trial gave them something they thought they would never see: truth. Diane's note, her final words, became a rallying cry. He's not the person you think you know. It was both a warning and a reminder that sometimes evil hides in plain sight, behind polite smiles, behind ordinary jobs, behind the man fixing the lights in your office. This case reminds us that vigilance matters. That when someone goes missing, every detail, every word, can be a lifeline. A note in a diary, a strange glance, a detail that feels out of place. They can change everything. They can bring killers to justice, and they can give families the closure they deserve. For the families, the verdict ended one chapter, but it didn't close the book. The birthdays missed, the empty seats at holidays. Those absences echo louder than any gavel. And as the sun sets over San Jose, one truth remains: justice may have been served, but peace is still out of reach. Richard Coleman is gone from the streets, but the shadows he cast still linger. And as night falls, we remember the victims, not the monster. This has been Crime Scene Chronicles. If this story moved you, help us keep telling the stories that matter. Hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more cases that reveal the darkest corners of human nature. Share this video because every victim deserves to be remembered and every story deserves to be told.